Welcome everybody to our November Wild Ones of Southeast PA chapter meeting. I am excited to share with you the fact that as of today, we have 80 members. We got at least 5 members since our last meeting. Some things were changed around and people that had previously been partners at large joined the chapter officially. So they must be within our region and were placed in our chapter. For those of you who don't know, our chapter covers a very large area. We're called Southeast PA chapter, but we have members in Maryland, New Jersey, and Delaware. And we go essentially as far west as about York County. And one of our previous members, Ed, started up a second chapter in PA in the western half of PA. So he covers the Pittsburgh area, but he has members in Ohio, and I want to say maybe New York and West Virginia. I'm not positive, but he's doing a great job, and he has actually given us a little friendly challenge to see which of our chapters, because we both started this year, will have the most members at the end of the year. So if you know anybody who's on the fence about joining, tell them that we could win. I think the offer is we get pierogies if we win, and they get cheesesteaks if they win. So we're swapping a little food for this fun little challenge. I like to go over our chapter schematics here a little bit, although it's November and the bylaws tell us that I think we're voting on our chapter officers and board members tonight. Susan's going to help me out with that because that's so not my bag, but I am Jessie. I'm the president. Audrey, I'm hoping, is with us tonight. She is our vice president and she takes care of our thoughts of the month, which we'll be having a little bit later. Susan is definitely on. She's our secretary and takes care of our Facebook page and does amazing highlights after every meeting. Our emails are up there if you need to reach out to us for anything. Michelle is our treasurer. I'm not sure if she can attend tonight, and she is looking to give up that seat if anybody's interested and wants to take on handling our money. We haven't done a whole lot with money, and I'd love to keep it that way, but we do have a little bit of money and things to do with it. Lindy is our membership chair. She's at work tonight and she cannot attend. And Marilyn advises us on all things native plants, and we're happy to have her. If at any time you have any questions about anything, reach out to one of us. We'll get your question to the right person, or we kind of tag team everything anyways, so we'll figure it out. We have an amazing website that Susan has been working on. We have links to our old meetings. Everything's recorded, so if you are looking, you missed a meeting, but you're looking to catch up, you can find it there. It links to our YouTube channel, our YouTube page, however you say that, which looks like this. So there's lots of great information that we have had throughout the year. And next month in December, it's actually been 1 year of us having meetings because our kickoff meeting was in December of 2020. So we give a shout out every month to the new members, and we've had 5 of them. So we've added Mary Beth from Chadds Ford, Regina from Collegeville, another great Alice from Westchester, Doylestown, and Gwynedd. So we are covering lots of areas in the South Central section of PA and beyond. And the intent of this shout out is for you to realize there are people in your town or the town next door that are wild ones that are interested in native plants and getting them out there. And if you can match up with these people and get bigger projects going, we're actually hoping, I've been in conversations with someone who's interested in taking a committee chair position for community projects. So hopefully we can get those details nailed down, and she'll want to take on that important role. And then if you are in, you know, Westchester and want to get something done, we can try and coordinate a project. So that's more to come about that. And if you're ever interested in anything like that, let me know. Susan is going to help me with this part. This is our chapter business, and this is our nomination slate. The last couple months, we had been looking for a committee to work on nominations, and we didn't get anybody who wanted to take over or take any new roles. But I think we have to do this officially because we are part of a nonprofit, a national nonprofit. We're a local chapter of it. Susan, can you speak to this a little for me?
Sure. So this is the month when we vote on board members and officers. And for a couple of meetings now, we have put out a request for anybody who's interested could offer, could volunteer themselves as a candidate or could suggest someone else's name. And since we're a new chapter, that didn't happen this year, which is not unusual. So all of the sitting officers and board members have volunteered to continue in the same roles. And that's the slate that you're seeing on your screen now. So we're going to have two votes. The first one, because none of the offices are contested, we can just have a confirmation vote for each one. The first vote will be for the board of directors slate, and the second vote will be for the officer slate. So can anyone not see the board of directors slate, or does anyone need those names read off if you don't have this on your screen?
There is someone calling in, so I'm going to just read the names in case they can't see them.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, the board of directors, it's Jesse Schiffler, Marilyn Smith, Audrey Yeatman, Michelle Hensey, and Susan Coughlin. And then the officers, I'm sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Let's just start with the nomination, the board. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so because we're on Zoom, the vote is a little bit different. Usually you just ask for the yeas and then the nays, but I'm going to ask first if anyone wants to abstain from the vote. You can either raise your hand or unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I've got the chat up. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so I'll record in the minutes that there were no abstentions. I'm also recording that we have 25 participants. Is anyone participating who is not a member of Wild Ones? I just need to know that for the count.
Yes.
One. Okay. Thank you, Meta. So we have 24 members. Chapter membership is 80. That's not even a quorum. I'll figure out later what to do about that because you can't manufacture more people at a meeting. Okay, 24 members. Okay, now I'll ask if anyone is opposed to the names on the board nomination slate, either one name or all of the names. Anyone who's opposed, either put your hand up or unmute yourself or put it in the chat, please. I've got a hand up with a phone number. What's that for?
I think that may have been because they're saying they're not a member.
Okay. Oh, geez, my video just disappeared. Hang on. Come back, Zoom. Oh, why did it do that?
We still have you.
All of a sudden, I don't have. Here, there we go. It's back. Sorry, it's just a laptop thing. Okay, so that's. Okay, so that looks like that's two people who are not members. So thank you, whoever you have your hand up, you can put it back down. I've got that. Okay, so is there anyone who is opposed to the nomination slate for the board? Now, is that why that hand is up for 610 or not?
It hasn't gone away, so I don't think that maybe they just, I don't know that I'm sure how to put my hand down, so maybe they just don't know. Lower hand, there, I just took their hand away. Sorry if you wanted your hand up. Put it back up if you want it.
Right, and this is for anyone who's opposed to the nomination slate for the Board of Officers. Okay, so we're not seeing anything. So then anyone who agrees with the nomination slate, who votes for the Board of Officers, please say aye or type yes in the chat or however it works. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and I'm seeing some feedback in the chat. That's good. And the reason I asked for that is that we have to figure out if there's a majority of the people on the call who are voting for, and it looks like there is. So that passed. Board of Officers slate passed. And I'm going to do the same thing for the officers. Jesse, if you could read the 5 nominations, please. Or
Sure.
4, or maybe there are.
4. As I think 4. Wait, let me make sure. Yeah. As President Jesse Schiffler, Vice President Audrey Yeatman, Treasurer Michelle Hensey, and Secretary Susan Coughlin.
Thank you. I'm going to go through the same ritual. If anyone is opposed to any or all of the officers, please either put up your hand or put it in the chat, or you can speak out. Okay, seeing no opposed, does anyone abstain from this vote? Likewise, seeing nothing, all in favor, please say aye or type yes or put your hand up.
Aye.
Aye.
And again, I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Great, the slate of officers passed. Jesse, we're done. Thank you very much, everyone, for your patience.
All right, and I want to thank you all, my board of directors and officers, for sticking with me, and every year it's going to get better. So anybody who wants to join us, we have a great time figuring out what we're doing with this. Anybody who's been with us from the beginning, I think that we get better each month. We get great speakers, we go on great trips, we've had great sales, and we want to have more and more projects out there in the community. So it takes a lot of work to make this happen. It's a lot of fun. So the more people who help with the work, the more fun it is, and the less work each of us has to do.
True.
I think that it is time for the thought of the month. And Audrey.
Jesse, I'm sorry, can I just ask, do we have a treasurer's report, which we're supposed to have every month?
Yeah, I did not receive anything from Michelle, and I don't think that she's on this meeting. And I know she's moving house, so I'm sure she's very tied up, but hopefully we can get that from her and include it in our highlights.
All right, thanks.
Audrey, are you with us? Do you want to do thought of the month?
I am. And I will. Okay, so this month we're thinking about cultivars, specifically nativars, which are just cultivars of native plants. In 2012, the Wild Ones National Board of Directors formed a committee to develop a position on the use of nativars for the Wild Ones organization. This statement was published in 2013. Much has been learned since then, and a new revised statement was released just this year, with input from the honorary directors, including Doug Tallamy and Heather Holm. You can read and download this statement from the Wild Ones website, but right now I just want to go through some of the main points, and I'm going to read this right from the Wild Ones website. So we know that Wild Ones encourages the use of native plants to promote biodiversity and ecosystem health in gardens and landscapes. So the question is, do nativars, which are again cultivars of native plants, have the same ecological value as straight species plants? And what's the difference between a nativar and a straight species plant? So a native plant is one belonging to a species that was present in a region, habitat, or ecosystem prior to European settlement. These plants have held an ecological niche in our landscape for centuries and reproduce primarily through open pollination. These plants are sometimes referred to as straight species or wild type natives. A cultivar is any plant that is developed or selected for its desirable characteristics and maintained by propagation. Cultivars are reproduced through cloning methods such as grafting, cutting, root divisions, layering, tissue culture, etc. A nativar is a cultivar that came from a straight species native plant. Nativars are propagated for many reasons: flower colors or forms, compact size, insect or disease resistance, tolerance of certain environmental conditions, and more. Nativars can be a native plant that is a genetic variant found in nature that is then selected and propagated to retain a particular or unique aspect. They can also be obtained through the process of artificial selection in which plant breeders grow plants with desirable characteristics and eliminate those with less desirable characteristics. So how do you know if you have a nativar or a straight species plant? Nativars can be identified by checking for a variety name in addition to a species name, which is given on a tag or catalog. For example, Brandywine red maple, Acer rubrum, and then Brandywine is in quotations, is a cultivar, whereas the native from which it is derived would simply be labeled as red maple, Acer rubrum. The desire for a novel or improved plant product, particularly one that is easy to replicate, grow, and market, is understandable. Yet these plants may not provide the same ecological return that comes from a straight species native. One way in which these plants are more limited is in their lack of genetic diversity. Another limitation may be in their their delivery of ecological services. Native plants grown from seed carry the wealth of their native gene pool. They perpetuate this diversity as they grow and participate in successful pollination. This genetic diversity helps whole species to survive and adapt when confronted by environmental stress. Each successive generation of plants reproducing in this manner continues to maintain a rich heritage. Most cultivars, including nativars, are propagated by cloning, so that each plant has the same genetic makeup as the parent plant, and so on. A cloned cultivar has a set genetic package. Sometimes these clones go on to participate in the natural reproductive cycle by cross-pollinating with other true natives. Sometimes they do not. If only a small percentage of the plants being planted in gardens and landscapes are nativars, there would be no concern. However, the mass production and increased use of nativars over straight species native plants is a concern for ecologists, environmentally friendly gardeners, horticulturalists, and native plant professionals. Straight species open pollinated plants and the genetic diversity they contain are the foundation of both nature and horticulture. They are the building blocks of future horticultural selections, as well as the key to ecological preservation. So the big question is about ecosystem service. Do nativars serve the same ecological function in the landscape with the same degree of effectiveness as straight species plants? Research on this topic is ongoing, and there is much yet to be discovered about the differences between specific nativars and straight species in regards to their particular usefulness to pollinators, as well as their ability to provide other ecological services, such as food sources for insects. So there is a pretty cool presentation online, and Susan is going to put this link on our website for us. It was about an hour, and I would recommend it. Annie White, she is a PhD at University of Vermont, and this was from 2017. So I know it's a little bit dated, but still relevant. So she grew up in this teeny tiny town in Vermont, and her family had a nursery. And so she liked to grow things. She grew herbs for them. So her story is interesting. And again, I would recommend listening to her presentation. But so she looked specifically at this question, and she wanted to know, are nativars as good ecologically speaking as straight species? And she looked at all of the things we just talked about, the reasons for selecting and producing a nativar as opposed to straight species, such as disease resistance, bloom size, bloom time, bloom duration, bloom color, leaf color. And I'm just going to go over a few of the things that she found. As far as bloom size, she said that double flowers are sterile or near sterile. So this is a problem because there are no seeds for the birds, like goldfinches, which we know love the seeds. And also pollinators can't easily get to the nectar on these double blooms. As far as bloom time, she found some differed in as far as a week. You know, and this, when you have pollinators expecting to come and get the nectar at a certain time and it's not available, then what, you know? So the big thing she noticed was leaf color. There was a big correlation with beetle and bug preferences. For instance, purple leaves, since they're full of anthocyanins, which are chemicals that deter insect feeding, this greatly changed, you know, with the nativars. Just not as good for ecological function. And basically what she found was the more highly bred the nativar is, the less appealing it is to pollinators. And she also went on to say that the nectar and pollen is not as nutritious in the nativars. She did say this was very hard to measure, but it's still very important to note. Also, as far as flower size and shape, for instance, in cardinal flowers, the tube of the flowers was a different size and shape in the nativars, and this presented a problem for hummingbirds. Same thing she found with great blue lobelia, which is pollinated by bumblebees. So it's not as easy for the birds and the bugs to get in there and do what they need to do. Other concerns that she had were similar to what we just spoke about. She says breeding native species for increased physiological performance can increase their invasive characteristics, which I thought was crazy. So we're planting natives as opposed to exotics, and yet we're turning these natives into invasives. This is a problem. We also talked about, again, the decreased genetic diversity, which decreases resiliency to environmental fluctuations, and the risk of genetic pollution of native species due to nativars cross-pollinating, creating hybrids which sometimes do not offer sustenance to the insects that depend on them. And the other thing she noted was that they are often, the nativars are less hardy. She had lots of winter die-off. So also, you know, Doug Tallamy in Nature's Best Hope, he echoes these points, and he says that most cultivars are propagated by cloning. This means we are planting individuals with no genetic variation at all. Loading our landscapes with plants that do not have the evolutionary mechanism to adapt makes little sense. Tallamy goes on to say that offering only cultivars for sale perpetuates the notion that plants are simply decorations, and how they interact with other species is irrelevant. So those are some of the findings of recent research, and I'm sure the case for choosing straight species over nativars will strengthen over time. And I think it's a good idea to choose the straight species whenever possible to provide the most benefit for wildlife, which is a big part of why we all do this. And you know, I think it would be great if there's a stink bug crawling on my computer. Maybe we can make it a point to start noticing the relationship that pollinators have to the straight species versus the nativars in our own gardens. And then we can share that info and contribute to the data pool. So at this point, I thought it would be fun to open it up to member discussion. Does anyone have a direct experience based on your observations in your own gardens with straight species versus nativars? What are you guys seeing?
I know that I can speak to having cultivars of echinacea. I had, before I knew how great native plants were, I just went and picked some pretty plants. One of them happened to be a straight species purple coneflower. And then at a plant sale for some charity or something, they were selling all these different colored coneflowers. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I'll get those and add to the purple coneflower I have. And it was the next year that I learned more about native plants. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got some double blooms and I got, you know, some fancy cultivar-y orangey ones. And I was like, oh, that's, I wish I hadn't done that, but I didn't rip them out. So I left them there. And for 2 years, they kind of stayed there and didn't really do anything more than I had planted. Like I planted two came back, no big deal. The 3rd year they were in, the cultivars didn't show up. It was more straight species. So I don't know if the cultivars died completely or if they open pollinated with the straight species I had, and the straight species is what everything reverted back to, because all of the babies were, to my naked eye, straight species. So I had many more coneflowers, but not more cultivars that I could tell. They all looked like straight species. So
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure scientifically if I'm right, but it seemed like they probably crossed and expressed as more straight species than anything else. So I can't tell you who I've seen it as advice from, but they said if you're going to plant a cultivar, plant several. That way, if they're going to cross-pollinate and open pollinate like our straight species would, at least we are getting genetic diversity out of it. Instead of sticking with a whole bank of one cultivar, that would definitely limit your genetic diversity.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting, Jesse. It's also worth noting that, and I just learned this recently, apparently a lot of coneflower color variants are just crosses between purpurea and paradoxa, which is yellow. So in that sense, it's something that could occur in nature if the paradoxa and the purpurea populations were next to each other. So that to me doesn't seem such a bad idea. Whereas as you pointed out, the double blooms or the blooms, the cone on top of the cone really makes it hard for pollinators, whereas the color probably doesn't. So I think there could also be a gradation of good and not so good cultivars. And we know that some nativars are also simply selections of, say, the blue is like, I've got blue wood aster all over the place and the blues are different. So I'm selecting for the bluest blue because that's what I want in my garden. And that's, I don't know, if I propagated it by cloning, it could be a nativar, but the fact that I'm just sowing those seeds in preference to the whiter seeds, is simply something that could happen in nature. So if we're interested and we dive into the science of a particular nativar, we might find that one is not so bad and some others are, like the doubles, are to be avoided.
Right.
That's a good point, Susan, because actually I forgot to mention that Culver's root. Annie White found that the preference for Culver's root was actually the nativar. So in rare cases, you will find that she did not mention, or at least I don't remember why she said that was. But
cool. Okay.
yeah, but once in a while you will find that.
I think that's why you can't make a blanket statement that all cultivars are bad, because potentially the reason that a nativar Culver's root was chosen over the straight species would be maybe it bloomed more. So the only difference was that it had more blooms, and more blooms attracted more insect activity. And so that was what looked like it was preferred. But it still goes back to, if you're only having that nativar, it's the genetic diversity issue that plays a part. So definitely taking into consideration what is being changed, how it's being manipulated, and what effects it's having. And then also trying to incorporate as many straight species as you can. Because on our opening to the thought of the month, I really liked, trying to go back, what Doug Talany says, that we have to convince them that there is a market for straight species plants that hold high ecological function, not just that look pretty. And it's our role, when we know better, we have to do better. So we have to kind of ask and demand that these plants that we want, these straight species plants, be offered so that we can put them in our landscapes. And then Audrey, you had sent me this great link about Arborvitae. Did you want to share anything about that?
This I just threw in there because this was my own personal, I want Arborvitae for privacy between my house and my neighbors. And I have been going back and forth about this one for years now because I prefer straight species, but I don't have the room for them there. So I've been looking at these and I just can't pull the trigger because I just prefer the straight species. But I'm just putting this on there to show just how many nativars there are of just this one species. I mean, it's incredible.
And this is a screenshot. It does not do justice. I think the list was at least 2 or 3 times this long, but this is what I could show that you would be able to read on a computer screen. So yeah, it was fascinating to me to see.
Oh, and well, unless anybody else wants to jump in with, is anybody else seeing anything in their gardens that they want to talk about?
I just wanted to share that in general, there aren't too many plants that I don't like, but every time I see Arborvitaes as privacy, my heart sinks. There are a lot of good choices. Laurels are Pennsylvania's state plants. There are varieties of laurels, and they stay fairly dense and green and offer privacy, and are much less common, at least in the area where I live. I live in Chester County, Malvern area. I don't see laurels that much, but I see Arborvitaes everywhere. And in my mind, I equate that to new development and, Mac mansions or bulk produced homes and then bulk produced gardens. So just my opinion, and I know you didn't ask for this, but I would say pretty please don't go for Arborvitaes. Find something else.
Well, the reason is because I need something much taller than laurels, which I love to do. Yeah, but I hear you. They're not going to fit there anyway, straight species. So I'm looking into multiple layers of other options as well.
And that's a really good reason to choose a cultivar if you want to plant a native, but you just can't fit the straight species. Better to plant a nativar than to plant something that's not native. So you're still making a good choice.
Agreed.
It's just a different kind of choice.
Do you know if there's, this is Marilyn, do you know if the nativars are as attractive to deer as the straight species?
They
Probably.
all are.
They all are.
me.
Okay.
Yep. Never found an arborvitae that doesn't have deer snack on the tag. At least not in my place.
Mine doesn't, but I have an unfair advantage.
You do.
They're
You have
inside my
fence.
privacy fence. That's the answer. Just put up an 8-foot fence and all of your plants will be fine.
So my arborvitae, and I think I have green giant, at this point they're about 20 feet tall, and the first 6 feet above my head are bare. I have hollies in front of them so nobody sees it, but if you go behind the hollies, you're in a really weird evergreen forest that's completely shaded, but there are no branches at eye level. It's all snapped by the deer.
Yeah.
Wow.
But they're fulfilling their function, which is height above the hollies. So they're there doing their thing. Just don't look too closely at them. Don't walk behind the hollies. Don't look behind the screen.
I was just with at Redbud, and they had a presenter talking about deer resistant plants, and there really are some ways to deal with it. And before this is over, I will come up with the name of the book, and I'll let you all know what it is.
You know
And
what, Marilyn?
Yeah.
That is a great topic for a meeting next year.
Okay, I could. I need to find out something from wild seed project that we could talk about too. So that might be one of them.
Yeah, but it
We have
just
lots of
occurred to
deer
me.
meeting too, so.
We talk about that all the time, the deer issues. So let's put together a presentation with everybody's strategies. I think that would be great.
That sounds great. And I'll still put the name of the book on the chat if I can
Mhm.
find it.
Great,
Sounds
thank
great.
you.
Okay.
Jesse, I'm sorry, real quick, I just
Yeah.
want to mention before we move on that while I was researching this, I came across an article by a group called Transition Town Media. And they have a website, transitiontownmedia.org. And again, Susan will link that for us on our website. But this is media as in Media, Pennsylvania in Delaware County. So I just wanted to throw that out there for any of you who are near that area. They are a like-minded organization and they have all kinds of cool things going on. So transitiontownmedia.org, check them out.
Awesome. Thank you, Audrey. That was a great thought of the month. Gives us a lot to think about and makes us more aware when we are shopping that we have to pay attention to more than just that the plant says native, because I've definitely seen plants that are not native anywhere near the East Coast of the United States labeled as native. And native is one of those words where everything is native somewhere. But if you're looking to try and serve your biggest ecological function, you want it to be as close to native to the area you're standing in as it can be. So
That's a very
another-
good point because Annie said in her presentation that the nativar, one of the nativars she used, one of the parents was from Mississippi. So again, she's in Vermont. It wasn't winter hardy, it died. Well, no wonder, right? So
Right.
there you go.
it's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It's really fun the more we get into this. It went from, oh, that plant's pretty, to, oh my gosh, how many birds and bugs and bees and everything does it serve? Is it going to help my soil? Is it going to save the world? You know, is it a nativar? Is it a cultivar? Is it just all of these crazy things that you get to think about now when you go looking at pretty plants? And to learn even more about plants, I hope that Jethro is on with us and can share some information. I'm really excited to hear about maple tapping. I thought that I saw his name earlier. I wonder if he had to step off. Nope, I see him. I definitely see a face. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
What's that? Yeah, you can hear me?
Yep. Yes.
I think my headphones aren't working. Thanks for having me. I believe I'm a member, so thank you, Wild Ones. So I live in Philadelphia, and yes, we have in North Philadelphia and lots of the area of sort of Montgomery County and maybe where you are too, depending on where you are. We have plenty of tappable trees, including the sugar maple, so the same tree you have in Vermont that becomes kind of, in the Poconos, Massachusetts, Canada. And I've been tapping our tree in the backyard for a couple of years, and then last year tapped 40 trees. It's through a neighborhood-based program called Oak Lane Maple, and then Stockton University in New Jersey was in the middle of a USDA grant, heard about my work, and my job is the community engagement coordinator for a USDA-funded maple tapping program that studies the efficacy of tapping the red maple, which came up earlier in the conversation. And there's plenty of red maples on the East Coast and plenty in the in the Pine Barrens. So anyway, my job is to create maple tapping programs throughout South Jersey and Philadelphia. And we do that through a community-based model where I don't know if people have tapped trees before, but you may know that you need a lot of sap to make a little bit of syrup. So you need the general kind of math is you need 40 gallons of sugar maple sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup. Turns out that trees in North Philly have a higher sugar content, so we need about 30 gallons, which becomes a big deal when you're processing sap to syrup. So anyway, the program really is about educating people about the trees. We do a lot of tree identification walks and conversations. We do a lot of collaborations. And this year, we're actually going to be able to process sap in the region in a sugar shack, and it'll be, I think, the first of its kind in our area, where people can bring sap to our sugar shack for to be processed in a collective way, because you may only have a couple trees, and to process that in your own kitchen will take a ton of energy and time. Your wallpaper will kind of fall off the walls, and you'll be frustrated and likely have a bad experience, maybe burning it. So we're trying to help people learn how to tap trees and make syrup without sort of the struggle of the processing side of it. I could say a lot more, but that's the basic idea. It's a kind of community-based maple tapping operation. Turns out there's well over 25 species of hardwood trees that can also be tapped. Trees like sycamore, the black walnut, beech, birch. Birch's season is a little different. In general, sugar maple is the one with the where you need the least amount of sap, which essentially is water with some other goodies, including sugar in it. So it looks like water. It's as heavy as water. So our trees last year were, our sugar maples were producing as much as 40 to 60 gallons per tree over a 4 to 6 week period in the winter time. So the season of maple is when it's below freezing at night and above freezing during the day. So the kind of freeze thaw kind of winter time, when the trees are getting ready for spring. And we only do, you are damaging the tree when you tap a tree. So you don't want to, the tree will heal itself, but we only tap each tree regardless of size in one place with a 5/16 inch tap. So most of the program is not so much about making lots of syrup, although that's important to some people. It's really about connecting people to trees and to each other, and kind of learning about a process which is thousands of years old, was really created by indigenous folks here in North America, and a way to kind of appreciate kind of slow, patient, hard work, because it's certainly it's a very short season, but it's very intense. So I'll stop there because you may have questions, or maybe not, but I'm happy to answer them. Thanks for having me.
That was really great, Jethro. Thanks so much. Susan, go ahead. You have a question?
Well, I just had an observation. I think it's really neat that you're branching out, so to speak, with trees other than sugar maple. We tried that a number of years ago when our daughter was in, when the kids are in elementary school, you do things like this that you question later the sanity of what you did. But we have large Norway maples on our property. So we said, hey, we don't care if these trees live or die. We're going to tap the suckers and see what happens. So we did. The 5/16 inch bore, and my husband made the little, I forget what you call the spouts, and we hung the buckets and all that good stuff. And we got some sap because they do run like crazy. If you cut them in February, they definitely bleed. So we got a bunch of sap and cooked it down on the stove, and it did not taste good. So I can tell you that Norway maple is not a sweet maple. So far it's good for nothing but burning.
Yeah, I mean, Norway is a controversial tree. It's one that I've cut down and removed most of them from my property.
Yep.
I kind of have I have a half an acre in Philly, but it's almost like an arboretum, a very kind of nice set of old trees, including a very large sugar. But yeah, the Norways, they're everywhere in Philly, unfortunately. The sap, if in a blend, it's not particularly bad, like blending it with other saps, although there's like a latex in the sap, so I avoid it. I did do a unique Norway syrup that it wasn't that bad. I'd call it more like an oatmeal syrup. I wouldn't put it on my pancakes. Anyway, and this year, really focused on the sugar, silvers, and reds. We have some black maples as well, kind of more often as like showpiece trees, and arboretums nearby. And we work with various community programs. We're actually going to be, the Sugar Shack will be at Wyncote Academy, just a couple blocks north of the Philly border with like around Old York, if you know the city, right, 2 blocks north of Cheltenham Ave at Old York and Ashbourne Road. And we'll have a 12 by 20 Sugar Shack. We'll have an evaporator that's 2 by 6 foot. It's essentially a stove. And we'll be, I've identified over 185 sugars within a 2-mile radius of the Sugar Shack. Each tree will produce 3/4 to a gallon of syrup, is a lot per tree. I don't have agreement to tap all those, but we'll probably tap 50 trees this year and make maybe 40, 50 gallons of syrup. And it's again, it's a cooperative approach. So there's folks that are interested in my emails there. If you have, if you're, I'd say within 20, 25-minute drive of Elkins Park, PA, and you have sugars, silvers, or reds that you want to learn how to tap, or you're part of a public park kind of friends of group in your community, oftentimes there's sugars or reds or silvers in those kinds of environments. And even if you live further away but you still want to learn about tapping, happy to help you learn about it. There's nothing wrong with doing backyard sugaring just on your own, and I can sort of tell you kind of how to do it on the cheap, because that's kind of how I started. And I made close to a gallon the first year, 20 gallons last year of syrup. So I'm getting pretty good at it. That's nothing compared to, of course, like an industrial model. They're usually tapping 20, 30, 100,000 trees in forests. So and it's also a great way to kind of talk about lots of issues from, I think it's really interesting around like culture, race, ethnicity issues, to every culinary arts and kind of where we get our sweeteners from. There's a whole history of the sugar maple being seen as an alternative to cane sugar, back in the early America period, during the abolition era. Abolitionists wanted to move the country away from cane sugar because of slavery, and it's used to make sugar. So, and that's a rich history here actually in this area, because Lucretia Mott lived here. And was one of the founders of the free produce movement. So there's a lot of great connections, and I think it's a great way for people that maybe aren't as, folks that maybe aren't gardeners or farmers, or like they'll say things like, "I don't have a green thumb." I'm like, well, the tree's already there. It's done all the work. Certainly, it's a great way to like begin to appreciate kind of what's around you and kind of these shade trees. In ways that are a little bit different than like other agricultural kind of efforts. So, any other questions?
Actually, yeah, we have a couple people in the chat asking, does syrup from a red maple taste different than from a sugar maple?
It's funny. I don't think it really does. This is where like I'm from New England, and people in New England can be a little snooty about their lots of things. Their sports teams, their syrups. So, I think I really like having a blend of like a sugar red silver, because, one, the sugar is going to produce a lot, usually at a higher sugar content. So it gives you kind of a foundation. At Stockton University, we have, we're going from 100 trees tapped last year to 400 this year, more in what you'd call a sugar bush. And unlike what we do in Philly, which is buckets that you collect, at Stockton, we have, a tubing system, more like you'd see like in the woods in Vermont or Canada. But I love the red maple syrup when I've had just the independent syrup. It's tasty. It's the same exact process. It's made during the exact same period of time. I think mostly things that can make kind of syrups taste differently are more about the processing. So there's like kind of the grading, and that has to do with really how quickly you can get from a tree, the sap from a tree into the processing, into boiling it. So our syrup, it's really hard to make it really light colored, because it's, we're not we're not boiling 24 hours a day like you'd see in a large operation. We do it 2 or 3 times a week. Usually a little darker. Any other questions?
Are the plastic hoses a pain to clean?
Yes, they are.
Like any hose. And then,
They're we use like a food grade 5/16 inch tubing system, usually like a tab connected to a food grade bucket with a lid. So yeah, it's there's a lot of cleaning, certainly.
and then I think it's Zach says.
Yeah, I can ask.
Okay, go ahead.
I have this large silver maple. It's healthy. Do I just assume I can tap it, or do I like check it for something?
If it has I would say, I say no to trees that don't have like a healthy crown. And part of that's also just practically, like if the tree isn't healthy with lots of leaves.
No, it's healthy, but I can assume I can tap it. There's
Yes.
no, yeah, all right.
Then,
Cool.
but what I'd say is I have a whole process, like you want to ask the tree for permission. You want to like
Okay.
kind of commit to the tree, because you are going to be removing sap from a tree that, it has plenty of sap in it besides what you're removing, certainly. But, in terms of the process of turning it into something that you're going to eat, you want to think through whether or not that's something you really can commit to, because it's a big commitment. So I hear about some people, like they tap a tree, they let the sap go bad, because sap is a perishable product once it leaves the tree. So you need to make sure it stays, stay 40 degrees or below until you process it. And you want to not have it refrigerated for more than a week or so.
Got it. Okay.
And happy to talk more, Zach, too. Like that might.
Yeah, thank you.
There, so. Other
Anna
questions?
asks, how much sap do you process at a time, and have you ever tried to tap an oak?
I'll take the oak question. I've never tapped an oak. I have no idea what an oak would taste like. It's interesting. In terms of, it's certainly not listed in the sort of like most of the blogs and homesteaders that have tapped, 28, 30 different species of tree. I've never seen oak listed. But there's lots of other ones that have been. And we'll be processing, I think this year, if we got to one way to think about it, it's not exactly accurate, it'll be different, but sugar maple will produce about 1 gallon per tree per day. So we'll be moving to something like 200 gallons at a time of sap to make something like 5 to 8 gallons of syrup. So yeah, it's very heavy. So it's a gallon of sap is basically 8 pounds, like water. So 200 gallons is 1,600 pounds. So moving it around is hard. That's sort of a big part of the challenge. Any other questions?
That's everything from the chat.
Great.
Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
of course. Yeah. So you can find out more at oaklaneMaple.com. You can certainly email me if you're working with like any kind of community groups that want to get involved, whether just locally, if you're further out from Philly, or folks that are interested in the area. Again, the model is about helping people learn how to tap, and if they're nearby enough to actually bring their sap to us. And we have the kind of a very simple kind of set of agreements to do that, so that the end product is delicious. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then I'm so excited. Our meeting tonight is so full of education. Our next portion.
Jesse, you ready?
Down.
Meta is with us, and we are going to learn about dividing plants. For lack of a better title, the do's and the don'ts. Meta, I am going to try and get you on my screen so I see. Okay, I am going to stop sharing my screen. And let you share. So at the bottom of your screen, it should say share screen. And Meta, you are muted, so I can't hear you if you do want to say anything.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. Let me
Yeah.
try and share my presentation. Just give me a minute. I think
It
I'm
usually
just
says share screen and then a window pops up asking you which one it, there you are.
Those of you that joined late, I was sharing with the early starters and hosts that I haven't done much of Zoom personally. And whenever I do public speaking, there's usually a team of audiovisual experts managing all this, and they're sending me messages on the side saying, you can speak now, you're ready. So I'm going to try and manage all this on my own. So bear with me.
And Meta, I apologize, but I do want to read the bio because I want people to know just a little bit about you before you get started. Meta has been interested in plants for as long as she can remember. As a student of botany for her undergraduate degree, she filled her tiny apartment in Bombay with all kinds of houseplants and a collection of pressed plant materials. Living in the US for the last several years has given her the opportunity to have her own garden, and she's been learning what grows well in our zone. Meta has been a master gardener since 2015 and enjoys a variety of volunteer opportunities that come her way. She is interested in all types of houseplants, flowering perennials, and native trees. She also believes that deer-resistant plants is a myth. I know there are several of us that agree with that. She has had deer eat everything except dandelions and Japanese stiltgrass.
Now that I have shared with you my sad stories of my gardening experience, I'm going to share with you some material that I have gathered from Penn State and other extension resources about dividing perennials. I would also like to share that I think master gardener is a slight misnomer. I don't think I consider myself a master of anything. I consider myself always learning. But what's interesting to me about being a master gardener is that you have to commit to finding and believing in and sharing research-based information. And that gives you sort of like a questioning attitude at all times. So I think being a master gardener is a journey. It's not a certification to achieve. But if any of you are interested, I would highly recommend considering that program. It's been a great opportunity for me for learning, meeting other like-minded people and sharing. And master gardeners have similar meetings like this once a month. And we have different speakers and people sharing projects, a lot of volunteering opportunities, etc. But enough about master gardening. Let me start with looking at dividing perennials. So I grew up where all of these plants were perennials. They grew all year long from one year to next to next to next without having to do anything. When I found out that dahlias have to be taken out, cleaned, dried, and stored all winter, I'm not growing dahlias. I'm not doing that work. Same with cannas. Cannas are pretty much roadside flowers where I grew up. And lantanas are like a weed. So for me, the concept of having to pay for lantanas and they die at the end of the year, very, very different. So perennial, this is the definition from Penn State Extension. I'll pause for a minute so you can read it. Most of you would have come up with a similar definition. But what surprised me is that underlined section, that the reason you divide is not so much because you want more plants. The reason you divide is most perennials will come to a point where they will stop, their vigor will start to go down. So the only way to rejuvenate them and give them a kickstart, if you will, is to spread them. And I thought, I don't have to feel greedy about dividing my perennials. I'm doing the plant a favor, and the extra plants I get is just a bonus. So I looked a little bit more, and there are, of course, different types of perennials. And some of us know these instinctively when we think about different perennials. But, and self-confession here, I've had a lot of mishaps with tender perennials. You know, some years they do well and some years not so much. And I just sort of take a deep breath, say a prayer to the departed perennial, and buy a new one. So long story short, all of these definitions is perennials. What's perennial? What's tender perennial? Depends on where you live, where you garden, right? It depends on your weather. And having lived here in southeastern Pennsylvania for 25 plus years, I can see things changing. I never had lavender survive in the garden for the first 10 years. Now I've been seeing lavender survive 3, 4 years, 5 years without too much caretaking. So you know, it's evolving, I think. So just a little bit, you know, why do we all grow perennials? It's a good investment, good return on your investment. The same amount of time that you spend planting it, watering it, is going to come back year after year. You have a lot of variety to choose from in terms of size, color, shape, bloom time. And my favorite, of course, is you can multiply your perennials by dividing. You know, you buy one tree or one set of plants 1 year, and then you can slowly fill out one area or multiple areas in your garden. And I think being a gardener is a long-term game. It's a game of patience and persistence and optimism. And perennials fit that spot perfectly, right? You plant something, you wait for it to reach its optimum point, and then you split it, and then you start all over again to see how it grows in the new spot. So if you just search when is the best time to divide perennials, you will get multiple zeros in the number of results that Google will find. But there's some common themes that come, you know, in every article. And I looked at a bunch of university sites and extension sites. The one common thing is don't divide when the plant starts to go down. Divide it when it's still in its peak, because that's when the divided plants will do better, and they will survive, and they will take better. Never divide a plant that is in bloom. A good rule of thumb is maybe just after it's done blooming, because that's when the plants put most of the energy towards growing their roots. Because of where we live and we have to deal with hard frost and ground freezing and thawing, it's a good idea to get your new plants in about 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes you will even hear guidelines that say 6 to 8 weeks before the ground freezes. That's because the new roots are very tender, and the freeze and thaw can be devastating to the new plants. If you give them some time to establish, then you have better luck. The only exception is the bearded iris. That should be separated and divided in August. But any other plant you could do spring or autumn. Anybody has any questions, please ask at any time. I tend to speak very rapidly when I'm passionate about something, so please don't let that deter you. Type, raise your hand. I cannot see everybody at the bottom of my screen, but I think Jesse will keep me on track here. Here are some of the guidelines I found in Cornell's extension information. And the one thing that surprised me is do it when the weather is cool and wet. So don't do it on hot, dry days. And if you think about it, it makes sense. The newly planted, the divided plant, it's been disturbed, it's been taken out of its home, and you're putting it in a new location. When it's cooler and there is moisture and wet and the soil is not overly dry, it's going to do better. So right after flowering and before the ground freezes are the two most important things that that you need to remember. So how often do you divide plants? General rule of thumb is about 3 years is a good indication. Some plants don't really need to be divided unless you want to split them, and bleeding hearts and peonies fall in that category. I have seen peonies in the same spot and not being taken out for like as much as 10, 12 years. I have some neighbors who have really dense and really filled out nice peony plants that do well. Bleeding hearts too do well, and they don't sort of go downhill after 3-4 years. So you can leave them if you don't need to thin them out, or you don't need to put plants somewhere else. This is an example of when it's time to, when it's actually past time to split something, right? When you see the center dying and spreading out, that's sort of a good indication that you need to split it soon. So you need to have a bit of a game plan together to do your division, right? You want to water those plants maybe a day before so that it's easy to dig, but the plant is also not starved and water stressed. You have to decide what you want to do with the division before you have a ton of plants sitting in your wheelbarrow or on your tarp. You don't want to be finding, where does this go, or who can I give this to? The plants that have been divided should be planted as soon as possible, but you can keep them in water for a couple days and keep them in shady areas. But make sure you have a plan for where you want those things to go. Don't do it on a bright sunny day. A cloudy day is better for the transplants. You will have better luck. And then make sure you have buckets, pails ready to hold your plants and keep them covered. And if you're not going to be able to plant right away, keep them in a bucket of water or in a moist area. I will send these links to you so you can share. I have been trying how to get it to play and I couldn't get it to play. YouTube kept crashing on me. So I will send these links to you. These were on the, I believe, Clemson University website, but I'll share those. And these are short 1 or 2 minute videos. They show you the different tools that are good for splitting different types of plants. And then they show some techniques on how to really split. I wish I could figure out how to play it from here, but I tried all afternoon and then gave up. So I'll share these links with you separately. But before you divide, it's a good idea to cut maybe up to top 6 inches so that the new plants don't spend all that energy growing their leaves and keeping the leaves up. So less plant material, then more energy goes to the roots and establishing in the new place. Generally, depending on the size of the plant, going out 8 to 12 inches around the base of the plant is a good idea. And that's how you want to dig so that you are getting most of the root material that you need to be able to divide. So different types of plants could benefit from different tools when you dig it up and you want to now divide. And divide is really cutting it. Some have spreading root systems, right? And those you can just split easily by hand, or like the picture shows, you could have 2 forks and pull them out into clumps that are a good size for you to split, right? And I just have a couple of examples, and I'm sure there are many others that you probably have seen in your own gardens, or got maybe divisions from friends and neighbors. The clumping root systems, ornamental grasses is my favorite. This is one I struggle with every time. You can't tell from this, but I'm really petite, weigh just a little over 100 pounds. I can never win with grasses. So that is very sturdy, and you need like a strong spade or a machete to split. But probably most of you know this already, but ornamental grasses are probably one of the easiest to split and spread and grow in a new home. They're not very fussy at all. And then the third kind of roots is rhizomes, which are essentially like special stems. And the best example is irises, but there are other plants that fit that category. And for those, it's best to use a sharp knife and cut it into pieces such that each piece has a growing spot in it, right? For like an iris, or if you think of ginger, ginger also has the little growing spots, and that's, you want to cut there. So, you divide all these plants, you want to get them in the soil, in its new home as soon as possible. If you can't, keep it moist and keep it in a shaded spot, under the porch, under the deck, or in a shed somewhere. Make sure you're watering the newly planted ones regularly. If there's been no rain, avoid any nitrogen-based fertilizer. A lot of guidance will say no fertilizer at all, but definitely no nitrogen-based fertilizer, because that promotes leaf growth. And if the plant focuses its energy on leaf growth, then the roots don't get established. So wait for nitrogen-based fertilizers at least 1 year. And if you're planting in the fall, make sure you mulch well, a rather generous layer of mulch, so that the tender roots are protected from the constant freeze and thaw. So that mulch helps give it a better chance of survival. So, you can divide a lot of perennials, but there are some that won't do well. And some of these came as a surprise to me. My lavender is growing crazy, and I was thinking I should split it. And now I realize this, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do the lavender. Or I don't have Russian sage, but don't do those. Plants that tend to have like the butterfly weed, and I know it's not native, so my apologies for having that on here, but that, because it has a single taproot, you can't divide it. You dig it up, you have to plant it somewhere else. But if you have that in your garden, you know that it self-seeds and spreads.
Butterfly weed is a native, Asclepias.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. I'm thinking
butterfly bush.
Butterfly bush, okay.
Yeah,
that
we
one,
all know we're not doing that one.
Yes, we're not doing that one, but that one spreads like crazy. If you have it, it spreads like crazy, and you don't have to divide it to multiply it. It does that by itself. Then, Baptisia doesn't spread. It doesn't do well with dividing. Lupines, clematis, they don't do well with dividing. Columbine doesn't really lend itself to dividing because it's like a single clump, right? If you really want to look at more details, Cornell Extension, Clemson Extension have really good lists. I believe Penn State also has a list of some of the common plants around here that don't do well with division. So I will send this link as well. This one has a list of what works for the timing of division, how many years can you, 2 years, 5 years, and then also what care to take when you're planting it. So I'll send the slides to you, and you can share it with your members.
Awesome. Meta, I also, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but speaking of that, if anybody's heard of, I'm going to try and line it up, this book, The Well-Tended Perennial Garden, there are lists in there also that talk about when and which plants to divide, kind of on what schedule, what's the best method. It has a strong focus on native plants, but it is not strictly native. So I've been reading through it, and it does have a lot of good information.
Yes, I like to read books too, and as you can see, I have a slight book addiction problem. The gardening books are on the side that you cannot see. I find that some of the books, and because I sometimes buy them used, older books will actually have recommendations like barberry and stuff. So when you do read those books, still use another source and just confirm, that the plants that are being recommended in the books work for you, work for your location, and are natives and are what you really want. Just like there's a lot of information online, there's a lot of information in the books too. And just because I've even seen books printed from reputable publishing houses, right? Because 20 years ago, they didn't care about that much. There's recommendations for butterfly bush and barberries and others that now, you would never want to do. So, just be careful. My guidance is always look for an extensions, a university extension program, and look at their material, because theirs is research-based, vetted through a lot of professors, a lot of research. So I find those really helpful. I'm a huge fan of Cornell's extension program, and their information is really good. They have a very nice list of deer resistant program as well. Unfortunately, our deer don't read Cornell's website, so they will still eat everything. But Cornell has a list that is in like order of preference, all things being equal, deer will leave some things alone, some things they will go to it right away. So it's pretty useful, very user-friendly, easy to find information. So Penn State, of course, is my first choice. But if I don't find something that I'm looking for, then Cornell I really like. And their information is also very easy to consume and easily available. So that's all I had this evening. Any questions?
I think you covered it all. Thank you so much, Meta. I actually want to, I'm going to share my screen again. I was thinking of you today because while I didn't actually do dividing, I had the perfect opportunity. So I purchased these 2 native mountain mints. They have the wrong label on them. They are mountain mints, but they are Virginica, I believe, instead of the incanum, which I wanted. And I don't know if you can tell in this bed, but there are other incanum there, Pycnanthemum incanum. And so these 2 looked very out of place. They're much taller. They were just gigantic and lovely, wonderful, covered in pollinators, fabulous plants. I wanted them very much, just not where they were. So I pulled them out today because it was a cooler, shady day. And I could have divided them, I thought, but instead I just plunked them down in a different spot where I wanted them. But I wanted to show everybody, if you haven't seen the little baby growth of a mountain mint, I just wanted to show you how lovely it looks. And it will stay like this all winter. And then it starts growing in like March. And it's so cute and green and purple, which I'm a sucker for anyways. But I wanted to ask your opinion when dividing this, which of those methods that you had mentioned, like the spreading roots, the clumping, or the rhizome, kind of, would you identify this as, and which way, if I were going to divide it, should I have?
I am going to guess. I have one variety of mountain mint that I got from a fellow master gardener. And based on how easy it was for her to dig a clump out and give me, I'm going to say it's probably a spreading roots. It's going to be easy for you to spread it out, not really go at it like a ornamental grass. And I don't think it's the rhizome kind. So it should be pretty easy for you to just, in that first picture where you had it on a tarp where you had dug it out, you could probably just, split it into 2 or 3. That one, you could, just like grab it in your hands and split it into 2 or 3, each one of those.
So maybe next year we can have a party at my house and everybody can take away some mountain mint, because this clump was I just put that in the fall of last year. So in 1 year, and it was in a little container. It was just so massive. So that's exciting. Okay. So our next portion of the evening is talking about some upcoming events that we have. Wait, let me check the chat and make sure Shannon says, thank you, Meta, for referencing this video on YouTube. She will be looking at it when she divides her plants. Everybody is thanking you for your wonderful presentation. Excellent. I'm glad I did not miss that. Okay. Upcoming opportunities we have. If you are a Wild Ones member, you have probably received this email. Wild Ones is presenting The Self-Perpetuating Landscape, Setting a Process in Motion by Larry Weiner. That's on November 16th. You have to register for it. It's a webinar. It's free. If you're not a member, it is things like this that is a good reason to become a member, because then you get free access to these webinars for education. This one will not be recorded. So it's not as if you'll be able to register for it and then watch it later. So if you're interested, sign up for that. There are amazing webinars that are free to pollinator enthusiasts through The Ohio State University, their Bee Lab, and all of their sessions are recorded and available on their website. They have done a lot of really great presentations in the past. So here is the list of upcoming presentations. They do a new series like every month or every couple months. They really put out a lot of education. It's really great. And this came up on something I was on this today on Facebook, I think. People talking about lawn conversion. If you have an acre of property or more, the DCNR has resources available to you to convert a portion of your lawn to meadow. And not just meadow, but they do like wooded savanna meadow kind of varieties. It doesn't have to just be a pollinator garden. They can do trees and shrubs. The person who was mentioning this program said that they had a significant acreage. I want to say it was something like 5 to 10 acres that DCNR was supplying 5,200 plants to put in on their property. They did all, DCNR did all the prep work. They did all of the marking for the plants. They did all of the digging. They did all of the upkeep for 3 years on their acreage, because it is that important to Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to try and increase our ecological functioning. So if you have property that you don't have the funds to put 5,200 plants in yourself, maybe reach out to DCNR and see what they can do. I know that I had a couple years ago reached out to some program like this. I'm not sure if it was this exact one, because I have 1 acre, and they were willing to work with me, but I was kind of just lower on the list. I would have had to wait for a while, and I'm very impatient. So I've started on my own, and now I have much less than an acre that would actually be able to be planted by anybody else. So I won't be able to take advantage of that program, but these programs are out there. So if you need help and you want to get plants in the ground, this is the way to go. Some business that we're still talking about, fun things that we want to do. Shannon has offered up a really great design for a chapter t-shirt. And in the future, if you have an idea for a chapter design for a t-shirt, send it to us. We want to, at some point in the future, have a vote on a design and come up with, you know, a logo and fun things for our chapter members to wear when we go on field trips and when we have our plant sales or when we're out doing a community project. So that's something to keep in mind if you have some artistic ability that you want to share with us. That would be great. We are looking for some of our members to commit to growing some native plants from seed over the winter using the overwinter seed sowing method, so that we can do some projects and sales. We would probably only need maybe 2 or 3 people who have done this, who have, you know, a hand at it, but the chapter will buy the seeds and we will get together to do the sowing and the potting up and have plans for the plants in the future. We are working on some school curriculum partnerships with schools in the area so that we can teach all of our youth about the importance of native plants and get it in the curriculum. And Michelle had the great idea last month to start a book club, and we had a couple of interested folks. But if you are interested over these winter months in participating in a book club that would meet probably every 2 or 3 weeks to discuss a book, so we would not be at a super fast pace, but something that would be comfortable for everybody, shoot me an email and we can work on that. And then Shannon had a really great idea that we could do a seed swap as members. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but I think how we could do it would be, if you have a list of seeds that you've collected from your property that you would be interested in swapping, maybe you email me that list and I can compile it all and then send out an email to those who are interested, and you guys could figure it out amongst yourselves how you want to swap the seeds. I don't know that we will have the opportunity to all get together to do a seed swap, but that doesn't mean we can't do like self-addressed stamped envelopes to each other and get seeds to increase our personal gardens diversity and just take advantage of what other members have that they're willing to offer. And then I think it was earlier today, it may have been yesterday, another one of our members asked about how to put out a request for volunteers. And I thought this would be the perfect timing. If you are in this area of Newtown, PA in Bucks County, the Quaker Independent Living space is looking for some volunteers to put in a meadow.
No. Can I speak to that?
Yes, please.
Hello. Yes, I'm Maya Simon, and I'm the person who sent this to you. So we have a meadow that was established 6 years ago, but it hasn't been maintained. I moved here 2 years ago and managed to get the trees cut down and have it mowed occasionally. But we do have a real problem with Japanese stiltweed, and we're all old people here, but there are 5 of us that work on this, and we've done the raspberry part of the meadow, but we're having a one-day event to try to get rid of the rest of the stiltweed and mulch it down. We had a tree that was hit by lightning, and we have plenty of mulch right next to where the meadow is. So this is a Saturday in December, the 11th. We will provide a bag lunch. I'm really hoping that we can get 6 or 8 or maybe 10 people to add to the 5 that we have, and we can just knock this out. And the meadow is full of many natives, but the stiltweed is making a real stand, and we're trying to get that knocked back. And I and one of the employees here are getting more education about meadow management so that this doesn't happen again. But we would really appreciate any help that you could give us.
Thanks, Maya. I'm glad that you were available to talk more about that. And I know if you were able to see our presentation last month, Dan had talked a bit about stiltgrass. So if you were able to see that, or if not, check out the recording and maybe that'll help you with some management ideas for your work day.
Thanks. I didn't see it, but I'll go get it.
Wonderful. And Meta also wants us to know that Master Gardeners also do a plant swap in the spring and fall, and they are a lot of fun. Yes. And here's the link Shannon shared for the DCNR lawn conversion program. So that's in your chat, everyone. And I'm sure that Susan is going to also have that linked in our highlights, and then it'll be available on our website. And that is everything I have for us tonight. Does anybody have anything they want to share? Anything that's going on in their garden? These wonderful warm days are really extending our time in the garden, and it's great because I still have things I need to get in the ground.
Did you want to bring that tree planting opportunity up on November 19th and 20th? Seed prep and the planting on the 20th and 21st, I think. Just remind people to look out for that email.
I think that I had sent the email out to everyone as an opportunity. I hope I did. But yes, there is another opportunity for community service to prep and plant trees in a riparian buffer area. Does anybody remember offhand if they've received an email from me about that? It would have probably been last month, shortly after our meeting. But I'll look for it and see if I can send it out to you in the next few days, because you have a week or so to respond if you're available. Donna said she saw hummingbird nectaring on cardinal flower 4 days ago. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I have like one bloom on my cardinal flower that looks really sad. No hummingbird is gonna feed off that poor thing. But that is awesome. Does anybody have?
I wanted to plant a trumpet honeysuckle, but like native honeysuckle, but I really had trouble finding it this fall.
The
So maybe I'll,
Lonicera sempervirens?
yeah.
Edge of the Woods Nursery has it.
Oh, okay,
Or
okay, I'll check
had
them
it.
out.
Definitely had it. You can come to my house and take cuttings. Mine is
Okay.
amazing. It's still blooming. Actually, speaking of things that are still blooming.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's neat. Then on a similar note, I read passion flower is a vine,
Mhm.
and it's native.
Yes.
And then when I go to stores, they're like, "Oh, we don't have that," or "That's annual. That's not perennial." I'm like, "No, I think it's perennial." They're like, "No, it's not." And so I
It's
don't.
really hard to find.
Is it?
So
So
I've been looking for that one too. The
Edge of
native,
the Woods Nursery.
the native.
Yes, the native.
Okay.
So, Zach, you're right in the sense that there is a passion vine that is not native, that is an annual here because it is native to like South America, and so it's much more tropical. But we do have a native variety that is hardy here, that is
Right.
native here. And Edge of the Woods Nursery had it. In fact, bless their heart, I was so excited when I saw it there that I didn't notice that it actually wasn't for sale yet. And so I took it up with all my other purchases, and they couldn't break my heart. And they were like, okay, we'll just check the roots and make sure that it's good enough to be sold. And so I did take it that day, and it actually made fruit this year.
Okay.
I was amazed. And the fruit is like a little, it looks like a little green apple, but
Yeah,
it's
right.
lightweight. So I was fascinated that it already fruited this year. So check there. They're really good.
Okay,
it's
I
the
will.
only place I've actually seen that has the straight native.
Cool.
Jesse,
Yeah, I
is
bought a
that the
trellis.
yellow one?
I'm sorry, Susan.
And
what?
also,
Is that passion flower the yellow one, not the purple?
No, it's the purple one. And
It's
there
purple.
is, yes, it is purple. And there is a yellow one that is, I feel like that one's still native, like south of us, still like Eastern US native, but I thought that it was like Southern. Don't quote me. Mount Cuba Center may have information on their website about the yellow one and its native range.
Okay, no, I like the purple one. I thought the yellow was the only one that was native to North America.
Nope, there's the purple one. And I could look through my pile of tags over there and tell you the exact genus and species, but I don't want to have you hold on for that long.
I'll look on their website. Thank you.
Yeah.
But-
Was
I
there
heard that
anything
in
else? That,
Virginia, Jesse, and it was actually invasive. I mean, it's native, but it grew so abundantly. It was everywhere.
What grew everywhere?
The passion vine.
It did. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and the flowers are like tropical. It's just
Right.
yeah, it's amazing.
spectacular. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think every plant in its place, right? So my husband really wants us to plant trumpet vine,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
that's
never
native,
heard
and
that.
it's an amazing plant. But what'd you say, Susan?
I said, so what?
Yeah.
It's one of those thugs. It's a thug. It's like grape. Okay, grapevine is native too, but you don't want it
So I told him that we
in a pot.
yeah, well, even in a pot though, it's still gonna it just
Got
would.
'em.
But I was
Yeah.
contemplating if I put it outside of its perfect conditions. So say I put it in a shady location where it can't climb over other plants and I can mow around it. I thought maybe that would contain it. I'm still contemplating, but
You know, I had it years ago in a shady location on a fence, and I thought I could mow, but it just came up everywhere. It would, I mean, tens of feet beyond the vine. It was just
Hmm.
too much. I think really hard. But if you could surround it with asphalt and the asphalt went down 3 feet, you know, maybe.
Wow.
yeah,
Otherwise, I don't think so.
I feel like I'm tending towards that. I see it in these great barren, like hillsides where it's just clinging to like rock essentially, and that's the perfect place for it because it's doing its job. It's containing from landslides. You know, it's like doing all these great things. But if it's that tenacious, I don't want to give it better conditions to take over in.
No, you'll be sorry.
All right, guys.
Uh,
Go ahead.
yeah, I'll be quick. I'm going to winter sow like a lot this winter with milk jugs and stuff the first time. And I want to grow more than just for myself and give it to my neighbors. And I'm trying to think what would be good plants to give them. Obviously not like purple coneflower. They already have that. My neighbors already have that. It would be something, maybe something that blooms in the fall, like New England asters, because there's not many fall bloomers.
Yeah.
Maybe something unique and get them interested, like butterfly milkweed. But anyone have any thoughts there? What you would give the neighbors?
Well,
Yeah,
we are
just
going to
say
do a
something
winter
easy.
seed sowing presentation next month.
Yeah,
But I think I would recommend mountain mint.
right. Yeah.
Attracts so many things, and that really gets people interested in it, and it's easy.
Yeah.
You
I
know
was
what
thinking
I
about
like?
that too.
Always great.
Zach, I grew Conoclinium, blue mist flower,
Oh,
winter
okay.
sown last year, and it bloomed the first year, which was nice.
Yeah.
It's not a fussy plant. My deer have not eaten it. And
Oh,
it's
okay.
really easy to divide because in 1 year, the roots, it's like aster, it just goes.
Yeah.
So after 1 year, they can have, 3 plants. They can divide it.
Hmm.
I think it's unfussy. Other people might have different experiences, but I like it.
I think that's a great idea. It's another easy one. And when it's really happy, it does go everywhere, but it's not hard to pull out. It's pretty
Yeah.
shallow.
Oh, it's pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one
Thank
of my
you.
all-time favorites. It's just so darn easy.
Sorry, Susan, we couldn't hear that.
Oh, I just said that's one of my favorites for winter sowing because it's just so easy.
Yeah.
It's very cooperative. Some of them are fussy.
That's great. I did, what is it called? Sea oats, chiasmantha, maybe something like that, last
Foliage.
year.
Yes,
And
Tasmantium.
yes, thank you. That was really easy to winter seed sow for one thing. I find it just beautiful. And it's one of those shade tolerant grasses that
Deer do not eat it.
and deer do not eat it, and birds love the seeds. So that's a nice fun one that has some just different interests that, not everything has to be a bloom to be interesting. And so that's a fun one.
Say
Zizia
again,
is an
that
easy
was?
plant. Zizia is an easy plant to get from seed and share with other people.
That's another good one. Yeah.
Beautiful yellow flower.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. And with all of those that were just mentioned, you just filled your whole bloom time, Zach. So
Right.
Oh, and Penstemons, any penstemon is, once it's up, it is a little slow to start, but once it's up, they're hardy. Most of them self-seed, and you'll find them all over your driveway, well, stone driveways and other places where you don't want them, and they're so easy to dig up and move around. They're another, I think, a very easy cooperative plant.
Speaking of them, I'm so glad you said that, because I had a question about just, do you have any experience with dividing them or cutting them down? I had 3 that did amazing for like 2 years, and on that 3rd year, because I had never cut them back or anything, they seemed to just not come out of winter well, because I left everything over winter. So how do you keep yours coming back every year?
Which penstemon did you have?
Digitalis.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you say cut it back, so you cut the bloom stalks off or you cut the basal leaves?
I didn't do anything. And that 3rd year, it got so big in the 2nd year that I was assuming that it was just damaged over winter from not being cut back, because the new growth didn't push out like it had previously. So I was wondering if I did something wrong. But thinking about it, I'm pretty sure that it was a cultivar. It was like one of those fancy dark ones. So I wonder if that was just an example of cultivars not lasting as long.
Right, but did it reseed? Because mine, I did have, what's the cultivar that everybody gets
There's like
with
a
the dark leaves?
Dark towers, or
Husker red. I started off with Husker
red.
Like 10 years ago. And Marilyn, that's what you have seedlings of. Some of the seeds come true with a red basal leaf. Some of them go back to green, which I don't care. They all produce lovely towers of white flowers. You know, Jesse, they're not really long-lived in every situation, the mother plant, but it reseeds so much that I always have 100 babies.
I would suggest it's probably short-lived, and so seeding would be the way to go.
Yeah.
I think I agree with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Good. So I'm going to continue not doing anything to it, because I'm good at that. All right, guys. Well, it was great talking with everybody. If you have any questions or you're interested in any of those things that we've been talking about, getting started within our chapter, shoot me an email. Let me check the chat one more time, make sure we're seeing everything. Yep, smooth your tongue. Yep. Looks like Meta headed out. Thanks, Meta.
Super quick. There was recently released high production value, like documentary on invasives from New York. I just sent a link to the chat. It's called Uninvited, the spread of invasive species. It's very high, very well produced. It's a little dry, but it would be nice if it ended up on Netflix or something one day. But it's worth a look.
That's the YouTube one that's on the chat?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I just shared.
Okay, thank you.
What are they talking about? Like invasive ornamentals? Because I know New York has a program where they're banning the sale of some invasives. Is that what this is? Or
Japanese knotweed, they talk about a bit.
Oh, weeds. Weeds.
Yeah, they talk about spotted lanternfly too. They talk about the dangers of cutting up wood and transporting it.
Oh, you know what?
Like
they
that.
have jumping worm up there too. So they have a soil issue, right? An invasive issue in the soil.
We have jumping worm here.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's not good for sharing plants.
No.
Oh, okay. Do you have it at your house?
I'm fairly sure I do. I might be totally mixed up, but I'm fairly sure that that's what it is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Not good news.
No, I don't remember any issues with the plants that you shared with me last year.
that was before I knew about jumping worm. I might be
sure,
wrong.
I know.
I might be wrong, but I would double check.
Do they actually jump?
They're very squiggly. They are very active and
Squiggly.
yeah.
You know what?
They move around a lot.
chickens love worms. So maybe my girls, because, well, they do go out. I take them out
Can I
every
borrow
night.
can I borrow your chickens?
Oh yeah, for a fee. Of course you can. Tell you what, get yourself a couple of bantams. They are so little that they're no trouble at all. And they feed themselves practically, and they love worms.
My dog would be so excited.
This is true. And the birds would be
Right.
excited with your dog about your dog too.
Oh. We've learned a lot tonight.
Yeah, it was really great. It was really great.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
So I'm gonna head out, guys. I can leave this open if you're interested in continuing the conversation. Look for an email with our highlights and the video link for our YouTube recording of this in the next few days.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
Thanks, great
Thanks.
meeting.
Great meeting.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, guys. Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Zach.
Good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jesse. See ya.
Thanks, Audrey. Good night.
Hi,
Good night.
I just joined last month. It's my first meeting. Thanks, it was really informative.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and check out all of our recordings. We've had a lot of really great meetings, a lot of education.
Okay, I will.
Take care. See you next
Take
month.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.